philosophy, planes, and Plato. When people think of Sicily, vivid images come to mind. Sunlit coastlines, elegant Baroque buildings, ancient ruins like the Greek theatre in Taormina, and the looming presence of Mount Etna in the distance. Palermo's famous piazzas add to the charm. And then there's Catania. Catania has always existed in Palermo's shadow, the overlooked sibling, often bypassed by travelers on their way to Etna, Taormina, Agrigento or Cefalù. It's the city where planes land, but not where the influencers choose to check in. And yet, every time I hear the word ugly, I hesitate. Because that label says more about us, the visitors, the storytellers, the outsiders, than it does about the place itself. Why do we feel the need to rank cities the way we rank people? Beautiful, plain, charming, ugly. Walk with me through Catania and you won't find ugliness. You'll find a city built from black lava stone, buildings that look as if they were spat out by the volcano itself. Markets with a mingled scents of swordfish, lemon, pistachio, frying arancini, and yes, sometimes garbage all at once. Noise and rhythm crashing together in the streets. Is that chaos ugly, or is it simply honest? A city that refuses to smile for the camera, but asks you to sit with its discomfort long enough to realize that beauty often hides in the imperfect. And, above it all, Mount Etna looms, a constant reminder that creation and destruction are forever intertwined. The frequent eruptions of the stratovolcano echo the forces within us: anger, desire, fear, and creativity. We like to imagine our lives as stable, orderly, but just beneath the surface, much like under Etna, there's movement, pressure, waiting to break through. To live beside this volcano is to accept that certainty is an illusion, that any moment life can change. As Luigi Pirandello once wrote, life is full of infinite absurdities, which, strangely enough, do not even need to appear plausible because they are true. If it's your first time in Catania, you'll likely find yourself in Piazza del Duomo, a spacious Baroque square made of pale stone, surrounded by palaces and the Cathedral of Santa Agata. And right there in the center, you'll encounter something unexpected. Not a saint, not a warrior, not a classical goddess. Just a small elephant carved from dark, almost black lava stone. This is the Fontana dell'Elefante, known locally as Uliotru, Catania's unofficial mascot. Why an elephant in a Sicilian city at the foot of Europe's most active volcano? The elephant is older than the fountain that surrounds it. Some say it dates back to Roman or even pre-Roman times, perhaps once part of a temple, perhaps a talisman meant to appease Etna's fury. Its body is raw lava, heavy and rough, as if the mountain itself had brought it to life. Legend speaks of a man, Eliodoro, an ambitious nobleman from the early Middle Ages, who dreamed of becoming bishop. When the church rejected him for his unorthodox beliefs, it said that he turned to magic, abandoning his faith in exchange for supernatural power. People whispered that he brought the stone elephant to life, riding it through the streets at night and terrifying the townfolk. In 778, a man condemned for sorcery and burned at the stake truly existed, His name, twisted by Sicilian tongues, became Liotru, and somehow, centuries later, his mythical creature, the very one tied to his dark fate, became the symbol of the city that executed him. Let's go deeper, back before history even began to be written. Long before humans set foot on Sicily, the island was home to elephants. Though not the towering giants of Africa or Asia, these were dwarf elephants, no taller than a man, descendants of straight-tusked colossi that roamed the land bridges when the sea levels were lower. Their bones scattered the caves and ravines. To the island's first settlers, those massive skulls, with their huge nasal openings where trunks once rested, resembled a single enormous eye socket, and thus the myth of the Cyclops were born, one-eyed giants who forged thunderbolts beneath volcanoes and devoured Odysseus' men. Sicily didn't just inspire Homer's monsters, it provided the fossils. During the Punic Wars, Carthage unleashed North African elephants to strike terror into the Roman legions. On the battlefields of Sicily, these colossal creatures charged across the same plains where their miniature ancestors had once roamed. At first, the mere sight of the elephants was enough to send Roman ranks into disarray. Horses bolted, soldiers scattered in panic. But Rome, ever resourceful, adapted its tactic. Yet, despite their defeat, the elephants became enduring legends, symbols of raw, untamable power, both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Centuries passed, but Catania's history was marked by tragedy. In 1576, plague swept through the city, halving its population in just a few months. Then, in 1693, came the earthquake, one of the most devastating in Europeans' history. In a mere 8 violent seconds, 2/3 of the population was wiped out, and nearly every building crumbled into black rubble. When the dust finally settled, an eerie silence replaced the once vibrant city. From that silence rose a miracle. Giovanni Battista Vaccarini, an architect with boundless optimism, was tasked not merely with rebuilding, but with reimagining. He carved wide boulevards and theatrical squares from the lava itself, turning the agent of destruction into the material of rebirth. And in the ruins, workers found him, the old lava elephant, cracked but defiant, still recognizable itself. Vaccarini, seeing a sign of fate, decided to give the creature pride of place in the rebuilt Piazza del Duomo, right in front of the Cathedral of Sant'Agata. He placed it on a marble pedestal, carved with representations of Catania's rivers, and raised its trunk in eternal salute to the saint. On its back, he set an Egyptian obelisk inscribed with symbols: a globe for the world, palm fronds for martyrdom, lilies for purity. The Fontana dell'Elefante is more than just a fountain. It's a statement: resilience over glamour, humor over tragedy. On warm summer nights, couples dance tango in its shadow, students sprawl on the steps, and grandmothers sit there fanning themselves. During the Festa di Santa Agata in February, 500,000 people flood past Uliotru in a sea of candles and devotion, a river of tradition that pulses with life and faith. Stand there long enough and you'll understand. The little lava elephant with its crooked smile is something else. He's ridiculous, and he's perfect. Let's walk down Via Etna, the main street that cuts straight out of the piazza. The volcano isn't just a distant present. It's the constant frame of every view, the ever-present horizon. And if you want to live in Catania, you have to treat Etna like a capricious partner, the mood shifting from calm to eruption of a blink of an eye, but always generous in her way. Sicilians read her moods with the care of an old friend, forgiving her fury outbursts. When the mountain rumbles, the city stops and wonders. If stone can be broken and raised again, what of the human heart? Does Etna remind us to fear or to burn more brightly while we can? Yet Etna was not just a force of destruction, it was also a source of creation. Its ash enriched the soil, turning the land surrounding it into some of the most fertile in the Mediterranean. This volcanic dust, when it settles on the fields, transforms ordinary soil into something extraordinary, perfect for growing grapes, almonds, citruses, and oranges. Let's step back to the 8th century BCE. The Greeks who sailed here saw Etna's glowing slopes as the forge of the gods. They believed Hephaestus, the god of fire and craftsmanship, labored beneath its depth, while the mighty Typhon, imprisoned by Zeus, groaned and raged deep inside. At this time, Greece was poor in natural resources. Its soil was thin, its harvests uncertain. As populations grew, Greek cities founded colonies abroad to secure the future. Catania, then known as Catane, and Syracuse were among these colonies, strategically perched along Sicily's coast. But the settlers brought more than just olive trees and Greek temples. They brought their culture of questioning and philosophy. Still, these were turbulent times. The cities were often ruled by men whose ambition burned as fiercely as the volcano above them. The prosperity of the island came at a cost. Constant wars between Greek city-states, between the Greek and the Carthaginians. Any attempt by one city to dominate another was seen as tyranny. As a result, the island was a mosaic of fractured, independent city-states, locked in a delicate balance of rivalry, shifting alliances, and intermittent conflict. Let's go on a tangent. Let us step briefly away from the lava fields and into the life of a young Athenian aristocrat born around 427 BCE, Plato. Plato's family moved in the upper echelons of Athenian society. Two of his uncles, Critias and Charmides, would later serve among the 30 tyrants, the brutal oligarchy that took power after Athens' defeat in the Peloponnesian War. When the regime eventually collapsed and democracy was restored, Plato dared to hope for a brighter future. But that hope was shattered when the city he loved condemned his teacher, Socrates, to death. In 399 BCE, Socrates stood trial in Athens, accused of disrespecting the gods of the city and undermining the morals of its youth. He was found guilty by a jury of his fellow citizens and sentenced to death. In his final moments, Socrates met his fate with a calm, philosophical resolve. According to Plato's Phaedo, the dialogue that recounts Socrates' last day, the philosopher accepted his punishment with a stoic serenity. He drank the cup of hemlock willingly, and as he lay dying, he continued to discuss the immortality of the soul with his followers. For Plato, this moment was a revelation. The trial and execution of Socrates exposed the fragility of democracy itself. It made clear that a democratic society, despite its ideals, was just as capable of condemning the righteous as any tyranny. The death of his teacher left Plato disillusioned with the political system, prompting him to question the very nature of justice. Plato left Athens and embarked on a long journey of education. He traveled to Egypt, where priests taught him of cosmic order and the immortality of the soul. to Cyrene, where the mathematician Theodorus introduced him to geometry, and to southern Italy, where the Pythagoreans revealed a universe governed by numbers and harmony. His journey eventually brought him to Sicily. In Syracuse, he entered the dangerous orbit of the tyrant Dionysius the Elder and met a young nobleman named Dion, Dionysius' brother-in-law. Dion had every privilege of the court and every reason to be cynical. He had grown up watching his brother-in-law, Dionysius the Elder, rule through suspicion, spies, and midnight executions. Yet Dion was different. Plutarch describes him as a lover of learning, someone who listened to Plato with strange delight. In the philosopher's calm voice he heard something revolutionary, that the just life is happier than the unjust, that true authority rests on wisdom and not fear, and that even a palace built on cruelty might one day be governed by reason. For Dion it was a revelation brighter than any eruption of Etna. In the darkest court of the Greek world he began to dream that philosophy might not merely interpret power, it might redeem it. For Plato, who lost his teacher Socrates to injustice of democracy, Dion represented something rare, an aristocrat, disillusioned by tyranny, yet genuinely hungry for justice and virtue. There was likely a moment of mutual recognition between them, two idealists connecting in a world ruled by power and fear. Yet the man who had absolute power over the palace, Dionysius the Elder, was far from the one-dimensional tyrant often portrayed in history. While his cruelty is well remembered, his brilliance is often overlooked. Rising from the ranks as a bold officer, he seized control during a time of political chaos and transformed Syracuse into the most powerful Greek state in the West. He built formidable Euryalus' fortress, commanded a professional army of 10,000 mercenaries, and pioneered the Kinkerem warship, a revolutionary design that would shape naval warfare for generations. For almost 40 years, he kept Carthage at bay, humbled rival cities, and extended Syracusan influence over southern Italy and much of Greek Sicily, all the while protecting the independence of the Western Greeks from both Athens and Sparta. By any measure, he was one of the most skilled statesmen and military commanders of his time. But he was also a man gripped by fear. He slept in a bed, surrounded by moat, trusted no one, and, according to legend, refused to let a barber come near to his throat. Instead, he had his daughters singe his beard with red-hot walnut shells. In 388 BCE, Plato was invited to Syracuse at Dion's insistence. The young noble believed the philosopher could achieve the impossible, turn a tyrant into a philosopher king, and transform Syracuse into a city of justice. Plato, however, knew the risks of trusting absolute power. Still, the same conviction that had led him to write the Republic now drew him across the sea. For Plato, philosophy was not meant to remain in the shade of porticos. It was meant to heal cities. The experiment, however, lasted only weeks. Dionysius, curious about the celebrated Athenian and eager to bask in the prestige of his presence, welcomed him. But when Plato spoke plainly that no man, however powerful, can truly be happy while ruling unjustly, the tyrant heard not wisdom but condemnation. To a ruler whose authority rested on fear, such frank speech was seen as subversion. Worse, it sowed dangerous ideas in the minds of others. Dion, torn between his mentor and his master, tried to mediate, only deepening the tyrant's suspicion. In the Republic, Plato would later describe the tyrant as the most enslaved of all men, prisoner of his own desires and dread. In Syracuse, he watched the theory come alive. The tyrant's patience finally snapped. Plato was loaded onto a ship, and by twist of fate it stopped at Aegina, then at war with Athens. According to Athenian law, any Athenian found on enemy soil was fair game for slavery. Within days, the philosopher who would later pen the Republic found himself on the slave block, his life measured in minas like any other prisoner. It was pure chance, or perhaps divine intervention, that Aniceus, a Pythagorean philosopher from Cyrene, happened to be passing through Aegina. Recognizing Plato, Aniceus bought his freedom for a sum of 20 or 30 minas. The exact amount varies by account, quipping with dry humor that philosophers should at least be useful to another, and sent Plato back to Athens. Once home, Plato purchased a plot of land just outside the city, where he founded a grove that became the site of his famous academy. Allegedly, he hung a sign that read, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter," marking the academy as a place of rigorous intellectual pursuit. He swore off politics, declaring that he would never again become involved in the affairs of the state. He almost kept that vow. In 367 BCE, Dionysius the Elder passed away, leaving the throne to his 25-year-old son, Dionysius the Younger. The young tyrant, untested and impressionable, seemed ripe for transformation. Dion, now his nephew's uncle, saw an opportunity. The boy appeared eager to learn, even showing interest in geometry and philosophy. Once again, Dion pleaded with Plato to return. Against his better judgment and despite his past scars, Plato sailed back to Syracuse. For a brief moment, things looked promising. It looked as if the impossible might happen. The young tyrant sat cross-legged at Plato's feet, tracing triangles in the dust, repeating that justice is the health of the soul. Syracuse shimmered with hope. Then the courtiers began their work, whispers, jokes at Dion's expense, insinuations that the real plan was to replace one ruler with another. The boy's vanity curdled into fear. Dion was accused of treason and exiled. Plato stayed on, half guest, half hostage, lecturing to an audience that smiled with colder and colder eyes. When foreign ambassadors finally negotiated his release, he left with a taste of ashes in his mouth. Dion, ever irrepressible, wrote once more, "One more try, reconciliation is still possible." A third time, incredibly, Dion persuaded him to return. In 361 BCE, against all reason, Plato returned to Syracuse. But the court had rotten further. Dionysius, now dabbling in philosophical treatises of his own, wrote poorly constructed works to prove that he was already the philosopher king and needed no lectures. When he confiscated Dion's land and slandered his name, Plato admitted defeat. He returned to Athens, bitter, disillusioned, and permanently cured of the illusion that philosophy could ever be grafted onto tyranny. Plato never saw Sicily again. In the broken figures of Dion and the two Dionysi, Plato glimpsed both the promise and the tragedy of his great ideal. He had projected the philosopher king onto men who were incapable of bearing the weight of it. The failure to make his ideal a reality echoed through his later dialogues, tempered by a wiser, sadder understanding of the human nature, volcanic, capable of both creation and destruction in a single breath. Yet we have had centuries to find better answers than Plato did. We still walk the black streets of Catania beneath ever-glowing cone of Etna, tasting the wine pressed from her fertile ash, reading Plato under electric light, and still asking the questions he first dared to ask. So far, the volcano is winning. But every time a new generation opens the Republic and feels the same stubborn hope that dragged an old man across the sea 3 times, the game begins again. Now let's step into La Pescaria, the fish market just behind Piazza del Duomo. You'll smell it before you see it. Vendors shout prices to the critical-looking customers with a rhythm that feels almost musical, and the air is thick with the scent of the sea. It's chaotic, loud. You might call it sensory overload. You can call it vitality. It's life without filters, without polish. You're not observing a staged market for tourists. You're inside the daily pulse. The fishermen of Catania are the quiet lifeblood of the city, rising before dawn to face the Ionian Sea. Their small boats, often painted in bright colors, return to the port each morning, heavy with the catch of the day. Sardines, anchovies, octopus, squid, gattopardo, palumbo, igora, and in lucky seasons, swordfish and tuna. For many families here, fishing is not just a livelihood. It's an inheritance passed down through generations. From a young age, they work 6 days a week, and to be a fisherman in Catania means more than hard labor. It means embodying a tradition as old as the city itself, even if the pay is modest. Despite the economic pressures, fierce competition from industrial fleets, and ever stricter regulations, the fishermen of Catania remain resilient. Their presence at La Pescaria every morning is a testament to endurance, to a way of life that balances hardship with pride. They are the bridge between the sea and the city, between tradition and survival, between local heritage and global commerce. Just when you think you've seen all that Catania has to offer, you discover Giardino Bellini, the city's lush green oasis. In the summer, the park bursts with life, where laughter and music fill the air. Evenings bring open-air performances, comedy acts that echo through the trees, and live music drifting from the pavilion. The sound of families laughing blends with the melodies of the string quartets, creating a vibrant atmosphere of joy and artistry. It's a place where the heart of the city, its resilience and playfulness, shines in every note and every smile. I've even spent one of my birthdays there. Winding paths snake beneath towering trees, fountains murmur softly in the background. And at the heart of it all stands the music pavilion, rising like a cherry atop a delicate cupcake, its beauty forged in fire and ash. Dedicated to the famous musician Vincenzo Bellini, born in Catania and often called
Il Cigno,
and often called Il Cigno di Catania, the Swan of Catania, the pavilion honors the man whose melodies seem to flow directly from the soul of the city. Bellini's operas, with their sweeping, lyrical lines and emotional depth, gave Sicily a musical voice that echoed far beyond the island's shores. In a letter to his uncle, Bellini wrote, "I am still in ecstasy in recalling my dear Catania. I spoke of it for whole hours without being able to satisfy myself." When the heat presses down like a hand on the back of your neck, the whole city makes its way south to La Playa, where a long stretch of golden sand unfurls for kilometers, and the Lidi, colorful little kingdoms by the sea, stand like sentinels along the shore. Each beach club has its own vibe, rows of umbrellas swaying in the breeze, wooden walkways leading down to the water, the scent of sunscreen mixing with the aroma of fried potatoes wafting from the kitchens. Families settle in for the day, unpacking picnics, while groups of students dive into the waves, only to collapse onto the sunbeds for an afternoon nap. It's a place where time slows, and the rhythm of the sea becomes the sound tape to a lazy summer escape. Catania is a city full of life. In the evenings, bars and restaurants hum with laughter, while scooters dart through the streets like a fluid dance. We try to categorize quickly: beautiful, ugly, safe, unsafe. But Catania won't fit neatly into any box. It forces you to linger, to dig deeper, to embrace its ambiguity. And maybe that's uncomfortable. Maybe that's why people call it the stepsister, because ambiguity unsettles us. We'd rather crown one city as beautiful and relegate another to the shadows. We prefer our beauty either pristine, like Taormina's Greek theater, or authentically ruined, like Agrigento's Valley of Temples. But if you resist the urge to judge, Catania begins to reveal something deeper. There is a saying, Catania is the dream born of fire and sea, carried in voices and glances, a city that never leaves you, even when you leave it. Catania is a city that never hides its character. It shows itself in the black lava stone of the streets, in the voices of the markets, and the steady presence of Etna above. In its cracked lava walls, its shouting markets, its green gardens pushing through centuries of ash, Catania hands us a quite stubborn lesson. Beauty is not what survives untouched. It is what keeps choosing to live anyway. Resilience is not the absence of ruin. It's the decision to rebuild on the ruins again and again until the ruins themselves become part of the beauty. Here, under Etna's watchful eye, we learn to see it differently, not with a quick glance that sorts the world into pretty and ugly, but with a slower gaze that asks, what has this place endured, and what has it made of its endurance? That is a real gift Catania gives its visitors. It does not ask to be loved at first sight. It asks to be understood, slowly, honestly, deeply, the way real love always begins. Thank you for walking through the streets of Catania with me. Good night.